The moving truck pulled away as Sarah Morgan stood on the freshly cut lawn of their new home. The pretty brick house with blue shutters in the Oak Ridge community represented a fresh start for her and her daughter. Sarah watched as 12-year-old Emma carefully carried a pet carrier up the walkway, talking softly to the occupant inside. "We're home now, Whiskers. You're going to love it here," Emma whispered, her voice steady today. Sarah smiled, treasuring these good days when her daughter could express herself freely. Emma was born with a rare brain condition that made her experience the world differently. On hard days, her anxiety would build like a thunderstorm, sometimes becoming so overwhelming that words would completely fail her. The doctors called these her nonverbal episodes, but Sarah simply thought of them as the days when Emma's emotions became too big for words. Whiskers, their orange tabby cat with bright green eyes and a white-tipped tail, was more than just a pet. The cat had special training to sense when Emma's anxiety was building, often pressing against her leg or purring loudly before Emma herself realized a storm was brewing inside. When Emma opened the carrier in their new living room, Whiskers stepped out cautiously, sniffed the air, and then rubbed against Emma's hand as if giving approval to their new home. "Look, Mom, he likes it," Emma said, her face lighting up with joy. The cat wore a small blue vest with patches that read "Therapy Animal" and "Medical Support." Sarah kept all the official papers in a special folder: doctor's letters, training certificates, and legal documentation that explained Whiskers' important job in helping Emma navigate her challenging world. Their first weeks in Oak Ridge passed peacefully. Neighbors brought welcome baskets and introduced themselves with friendly smiles. Emma started at her new school and came home each day with stories about her classes and new friends. Sarah found work at a local design company that understood her need for flexible hours. Most importantly, Emma's anxiety attacks became less frequent. Some mornings, Sarah would find her daughter and Whiskers curled up together in a patch of sunlight, both looking completely at peace. "I think we're going to be happy here," Sarah told her sister during their weekly phone call. "Emma is doing so well, and the neighborhood seems perfect." She had no way of knowing that someone was already watching their home with disapproving eyes. Barbara Winters stood at her bedroom window each morning with a cup of black coffee, surveying the Oak Ridge community like a queen overlooking her kingdom. At 62, with her perfectly styled silver hair and collection of pastel pantsuits, she had served as the Homeowners Association president for 8 long years. A retired office manager with too much time on her hands, Barbara had memorized every line of the community rulebook. "Rules create harmony," she would announce at each monthly HOA meeting, tapping her heavy binder of regulations. "Without order, we have chaos." The neighbors had other names for her behind closed doors. Rulebook Barbara was the kindest. Many residents had learned to keep their heads down when her white SUV crawled slowly past their homes, her notebook ready to record any infractions. Barbara's proudest achievements were written into the HOA bylaws themselves. Under her leadership, the community had banned chickens, unhygienic, rabbits, they dig, and any dog weighing more than 30 pounds, excessive barking, and waste issues. 3 families had moved away last year after her crusade against basketball hoops, visual pollution. "Did you see the new family on Maple Street?" asked Eleanor, the only board member who occasionally stood up to Barbara. They were walking their usual Tuesday inspection route through the neighborhood. "The blue shutters? Yes, they need repainting already," Barbara replied, making a note. "They seem nice. The daughter has some health challenges, I heard." Barbara barely listened as she suddenly stopped walking. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted something orange in the front window of the Morgan home. "Is that a cat?" Barbara's voice dropped to a whisper, as if she'd spotted something truly shocking. "Oh, that's a therapy animal," Eleanor explained. "Jenny across the street told me it helps their daughter with her medical condition. They have all the proper—" Barbara was already flipping through her binder. "Pets must be approved by the board." Section 4, paragraph 7. Her thin lips formed a tight smile. "And I don't recall approving any cat." But medical exceptions need to be properly submitted and reviewed. Barbara cut in. I'll handle this personally. That evening, Barbara printed the first violation notice, feeling the familiar satisfaction of maintaining order. As she slipped the envelope into the Morgans' mailbox, she noticed the cat again, sitting in the window watching her with unblinking green eyes. This neighborhood was perfect before you arrived, she whispered to the cat. And it will be perfect again. 3 pink violation notices arrived in the Morgan family's mailbox during their first month of Barbara's attention. Each one listed a different complaint: unauthorized pet on premises, improper yard maintenance, and unapproved window treatments. This is ridiculous, Sarah said, placing the latest notice on the kitchen counter. She had already called the HOA office twice, leaving messages explaining Whisker's therapy animal status. No one returned her calls. Emma, sitting at the breakfast table with Whiskers curled in her lap, looked up with worried eyes. Are they going to make us get rid of him? Absolutely not, Sarah assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Whiskers is protected by actual laws, not just neighborhood rules. Sarah began documenting everything. She took daily photos of their yard, installed a small camera on their porch, and kept all violation notices in a growing folder. Meanwhile, Emma started watching for Barbara's white SUV through the living room window, her shoulders tensing whenever it appeared. Mom, she's taking pictures of our house again, Emma called one Saturday afternoon. Whiskers pressed against her leg, sensing the rising anxiety. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a certified letter announcing a special HOA meeting to discuss ongoing violations. With Emma's medical documentation in hand and Whiskers wearing his official therapy vest, they arrived at the community center 15 minutes early. The room was half filled with curious neighbors. Barbara sat at the center of a long table, flanked by 4 board members. Her silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights as she called the meeting to order precisely at 7:00 p.m. We're addressing continued noncompliance at 347 Maple Street, Barbara announced, not looking at Sarah or Emma. Multiple violations remain uncorrected. When Sarah's turn to speak came, she placed Emma's medical documents on the table. Her voice remained steadied despite her racing heart. My daughter has a documented medical condition, and Whiskers is a registered therapy animal. Federal housing laws protect our right to keep him regardless of HOA regulations. Barbara's smile never reached her eyes. We have no record of an approved exception application. I submitted it 3 times, Sarah replied, pulling copies from her folder. Insufficient documentation, Barbara said without glancing at the papers. The board will need time to review. On the drive home, Emma remained silent, her fingers buried in Whiskers' fur. The next morning, Sarah discovered their mailbox stuffed with 5 new violation notices. Later that day, she spotted Barbara standing across the street, photographing their home with a large camera. When Sarah waved, Barbara turned and walked away. We need to be careful, Sarah told Emma that evening. I think this woman might be a bit obsessed. Sarah sat at her kitchen table late into the night, organizing the evidence Michael had gathered. Police reports would be filed, but she knew that wouldn't be enough. Barbara needed to face consequences that would truly matter to her. We need to be smart about this, Sarah told her sister. I don't want revenge. I want justice. The next morning, Sarah called the law firm that handled her divorce years ago. The attorney, Ms. Patel, listened carefully to the story. You have a strong case for harassment and animal cruelty, she confirmed. But there's also a Fair Housing Act violation. Interfering with a therapy animal for a person with a disability is illegal at the federal level. With legal guidance, Sarah compiled a comprehensive dossier. Veterinary reports confirming antifreeze poisoning, security footage screenshots, text message evidence, and testimonials from former residents. She added Emma's medical documentation showing Whiskers' role in her care, along with before and after records of Emma's anxiety episodes. What's our next step? Sarah asked Ms. Patel. Let's not confront Barbara directly, the attorney advised. People like her often become more dangerous when cornered. Instead, I think we start with her employer. Sarah made an appointment with Drew Westlake, CEO of Westlake Industries. His assistant initially tried to schedule a quick 15-minute meeting, but when Sarah mentioned animal cruelty and Barbara Winters, she was given an hour the very next day. The Westlake building stood tall in the city center, all glass and steel. Sarah dressed professionally and brought 2 identical folders containing the evidence. Drew Westlake's office overlooked the city park. He greeted Sarah with a firm handshake, his expression serious. "I understand this concerns my executive assistant," he said, gesturing for her to sit. Sarah spoke calmly, letting the evidence speak for itself. She explained how Barbara's actions affected her disabled daughter, showing Emma's medical records and the security footage. She detailed the pattern of harassment and the veterinary bills totaling over $3,000. "Your company promotes values of community support and inclusion," Sarah said, sliding one folder across his desk. "Yet your executive assistant is deliberately harming a disabled child's therapy animal while representing your organization in the community." Drew's face darkened as he examined the text messages. "How is your daughter doing now?" he asked quietly. "She hasn't spoken in 10 days, Sarah replied. "And Whiskers is still fighting for his life." Drew closed the folder and met Sarah's eyes. "I want you to know I take this extremely seriously. What are you hoping will happen here, Ms. Morgan?" Sarah leaned forward. "I want my daughter to feel safe in her own home again. I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in accountability." Tuesday started like any other school day. Sarah packed Emma's lunch while the girl fed Whiskers his morning meal. "He seems extra hungry today." Emma laughed as the orange tabby purred loudly. "Don't forget your science project," Sarah reminded her as they headed out the door. Whiskers watched from the window, tail swishing back and forth as they drove away. The school day passed quickly. Emma's teacher praised her volcano project, and for once, no anxiety clouded her day. By the time Sarah picked her up, Emma was eager to tell Whiskers about her success. "He's going to be so proud of me," she said, bouncing in her seat. The moment they stepped through the front door, Emma sensed something was wrong. Whiskers wasn't waiting in his usual spot on the couch near the entry. "Whiskers," Emma called, her voice rising slightly. "Where are you, buddy?" They found him behind the couch, curled in a tight ball. His usually bright eyes looked dull, and he didn't respond when Emma gently stroked his fur. "Mom, something's wrong," Emma whispered, fear tightening her voice. Sarah knelt beside the cat, noticing he felt warm. When she offered his favorite treat, Whiskers turned away. "Maybe he ate something that upset his stomach," Sarah suggested, trying to sound calm. "Let's watch him for a bit." By dinner time, Whiskers had vomited twice and was breathing rapidly. When his body suddenly stiffened and began to tremble, Sarah grabbed her car keys. "We need to go to the animal hospital. Now." The emergency veterinarian, Dr. Chen, rushed Whiskers into the back room immediately. Emma sat in the waiting room, rocking slightly, her words becoming scattered and few. The familiar fog of an anxiety episode was closing in. "It looks like antifreeze poisoning," Dr. Chen explained when she returned. "We're starting treatment, but you should know it's very serious." "How would he have access to antifreeze?" "He doesn't," Sarah said firmly. "He's an indoor cat." While Emma stayed with Whiskers, Sarah called their neighbor Mark, who had security cameras facing part of their yard. "I hate to ask, but could you check your footage from today? I'm at the emergency vet with Whiskers. The doctor thinks he was poisoned." 2 hours later, as Whiskers fought for his life on IV fluids, Mark texted Sarah, "Found something. 2:15 p.m. today. You need to see this." The grainy video showed a familiar figure approaching their backyard fence. Barbara Winters, looking carefully around before slipping through the gate, carrying a small container in her gloved hand. Back at the animal hospital, Emma had stopped speaking entirely. She sat motionless beside Whiskers' cage, tears silently 3 days passed in a blur of veterinary visits and sleepless nights. Whiskers remained at the animal hospital, connected to machines that beeped and hummed. The bills mounted quickly: emergency treatment, special medications, overnight monitoring. But Sarah couldn't focus on the cost. Emma's silence worried her even more than the cat's condition. "I need to understand what happened," Sarah told her sister on the phone. "And I need proof." With Emma staying at her aunt's house for emotional support, Sarah contacted Michael Reeves, a private investigator recommended by a coworker. They met at a coffee shop away from Oak Ridge. "Tell me everything," Michael said, his weathered face serious as he opened a notebook. Sarah explained the months of harassment, the violation notices, and finally showed him the security footage on her phone. Michael watched it twice, his expression darkening. "This goes beyond neighborhood disputes," he said. "This is criminal." Over the next week, Michael uncovered troubling patterns. Barbara had targeted at least 7 families before the Morgans, all of whom eventually moved away. He found online community forums where former Oak Ridge residents shared similar stories: endless violations, surveillance, and sudden property damage. Most surprising was Barbara's professional life. She wasn't just a retiree with too much time. She worked as executive assistant to the CEO of Westlake Industries, a company known for its charitable giving and community support programs. "They donate thousands to animal shelters every year," Michael noted. Her boss would be horrified by this. The most damning evidence came from Barbara's own words. Michael had spoken with Elaine, a former HOA board member who'd resigned months earlier. She provided screenshots of text messages from Barbara. "Problem cat will be gone soon. Found a permanent solution. Once they leave, we can get a normal family in that house." Sarah felt sick reading the messages. She planned this. Michael nodded grimly. "And she's done it before." He collected statements from 5 former residents who described similar campaigns of harassment. One family's dog had mysteriously fallen ill after Barbara had been seen near their yard. They'd moved away shortly after. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, looking through the growing file of evidence. "Go to the police." Michael leaned forward. "The police matter, yes, but I've learned something about people like Barbara. They care about their reputation and position more than anything. And I believe I've found her weakness." He showed Sarah the Westlake Industries website, featuring Barbara in a company photo, standing proudly beside the CEO. The caption read, "Leading our community outreach initiatives. You have options," Michael said, "and more power than you realize." The following Monday, Barbara Winters arrived at Westlake Industries as usual, swiping her security badge at 7:45 a.m. By 8:30, she was called to the CEO's office. By 9:15, she was escorted from the building by security, carrying a small box of personal items, her face flushed with anger and shock. Sarah received a phone call that afternoon from Drew Westlake himself. "Ms. Winters is no longer employed by our company," he said simply, "and we'd like to help with your veterinary expenses." That same day, the police arrived at Barbara's home with questions about animal cruelty and harassment. The officers carried copies of the same evidence Sarah had presented to Westlake Industries. News traveled quickly through Oak Ridge. Eleanor, the HOA board member who had occasionally challenged Barbara, called for an emergency meeting. Neighbors Sarah barely knew stopped by with cards for Emma and treats for Whiskers, who was finally stable enough to come home after 2 weeks of intensive care. "We had no idea," one neighbor confessed. "She always made it seem like she was enforcing rules everyone agreed on." The emergency HOA meeting was packed with residents. Barbara didn't attend. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president, appointing Eleanor as interim leader. Their first official action was to amend the community bylaws, adding specific protections for service and therapy animals. "We need to make this right," Eleanor announced to applause. Life slowly returned to normal for the Morgan family. Whiskers regained his strength day by day, though the veterinarian warned he might have some permanent kidney damage. More importantly, as the cat improved, Emma began speaking again. First just whispers to Whiskers, then full sentences with her mother. One morning, 6 months later, Emma surprised Sarah with an idea. "I want to help other kids with therapy animals," she said, sketching out a poster design. "Maybe we could have a special day at school. I could teach everyone why animals like Whiskers are so important." Sarah smiled, watching her daughter's confidence grow. With help from Eleanor and the new HOA board, Emma organized Oak Ridge's first Therapy Animal Awareness Day. 20 families from neighboring communities attended, bringing service dogs, therapy cats, and even one emotional support rabbit. Barbara Winters moved away soon after losing her job. The new family in her house planted sunflowers along the fence and adopted a rescue dog. Whiskers, now wearing a new therapy vest with special patches made by neighbors, sat in the Morgans' front window most afternoons. Sometimes children would wave to him as they passed. He would blink slowly back at them, a cat's way of showing love to friends who helped save his life.